Welcome back to another episode of the Experts in Fire podcast. I'm your host, Mike Vennard, and with me today is Randy Mowry. Today's episode is, can I burn my fireplace with my glass doors shut? Let's get into it. Hey Randy, how you doing, brother?
I'm doing fantastic. Mike, how are you doing over there today?
I'm pretty fantastic. We're going to talk about fireplace doors. We just did an episode on getting to know your fireplace, so you know which fireplace door is right for you. If you haven't heard it, check it out. But this episode, we're going to talk about, can I burn my fireplace? So I actually have a fire going with my glass doors shut.
Ooh.
Randy?
Good question. I like it. I like it.
Oh, well, let's talk about it, right? We get this question all the time.
We do.
All the time.
We do.
So what is the answer to this question?
So what you're going to find is almost all door manufacturers are going to say no. So the glass that comes in fireplace glass doors, generally speaking, is going to be a tempered glass. It could range 3 to 425, 450, like in a thermal shock rating as far as the glass goes. It's tempered glass. So I think where the misconception comes possibly where folks think they can just close the doors and burn with it closed is because they have the damper control at the bottom of their doors possibly. And if I just open that up, the heat's going to come out. You're heating that glass up. And it's a rough question, Mike. I mean, because, it really is.
If you just fall to the manufacturer, it's basically, and I understand why they do it, right? Because people get raging fires going and they want to close the door and act as if it's a direct vent unit, right? And the manufacturers are getting complaints and they're being told, hey, you got horrible doors. They broke when I had this raging fire going and I closed them. Well, if you read the manual, it says right in there, it's not for use while the fire is going. And it's because of the glass.
It is, yeah. And that's where I was going too, Mike, is everybody builds a fire differently. A young person versus like my folks, they're going to burn completely different.
Right.
So the glass is the key thing. It's not a wood stove insert. It's not they're not designed to be used as a wood stove. A lot of things can happen. The frame can bend. The glass can blow out. There are options. You can go into a ceramic glass that has a thermal shock rating of like close to 2,000 degrees, and that's what's used on wood stove inserts. But you're getting into a whole different classification of door and category of door at that point as well.
You have fire-related questions, and we have answers. You can email us your questions at podcast@woodlanddirect.com or give us a call at 586-221-3638. We would love to be able to answer them right here on the Experts in Fire podcast. Right. And I think you bring up a good point. I mean, if that's somebody's intent, there are things that manufacturers have done so that you can do that when it comes to ceramic glass. However, let's stick with just the normal, because what happens is as soon as we answer the question, right, that customer calls and says, well, okay, can I burn with the doors closed? And we say no. And it's right there in the manual. It's not me, right? It's the manufacturer saying that. Then you get all the questions that follow that. Well, why not? And you've spoken to that. It's because the glass will shatter and it will go all over your house. You can damage the extruded aluminum or steel or whatever you've used for the framing, and that can bend and bow because of heat. But then you get more questions like, but Randy, what if the fire's dying down and I just want to go to bed? Can I close the doors in to make sure that there's no sparks, pops, anything of that nature that come into the living room? And I'm curious, how would you answer that?
How we answer that is, at the end of the evening when that fire is dying down, that's typically when you're going to open that damper control fully, close those doors. And this is how I used mine. At my old house, we had the wood burning fireplace and always burned with the glass doors in the open position. when I was ready to go down for the night, I would make sure that that log, that last log was nearly burnt out, and you have that hot ember bed in there. Close the glass doors, close the spark screen fully, because you could still get some sparks popping off. So you still want to make sure that screen's completely closed. Close those glass doors, leaving the damper open. I'd open that draft assembly, and then in the morning go down, close everything up. As far as the damper goes. And that's how I would use my glass doors. And in a decade or longer, never had a problem with the glass doors.
I think that's the understanding. As long, to say it's a hard and fast rule, never, ever, ever, ever. I think it's more of you need to have an understanding of what your glass doors are for. And your glass doors, your typical standard glass doors, are to close off a hole in the wall that you have. When you think about a house, we do so much work to make them tight, right? You've got Tyvek wrap around them. You've got roof systems with new venting systems to keep the attic nice and cool while allowing your house to keep the heat in, right? You have insulation. You have all these different things in place to keep the house tight. And then we go, we want a fireplace. And we literally take a balloon and stick a straw right through it.
Exactly.
It's just a hole in your house. So those glass doors function to help close off that hole and keep that cold air from pushing down the chimney, because the cold air pushes downward and into your home. That's one thing. The second thing, I think, is exactly what you described. There's a safety feature to it, but you need to understand that that glass has a temperature rating and it can break. As long as you understand the tool and what you're using, this is how I used to approach it with customers, then you use your smarts and how you want to utilize those doors. And that is definitely a no when it comes to raging fire. But as the fire's going down, like you said, for protection, for safety, absolutely. You can see how that would function properly. So are there other scenarios in your mind that you've had conversations of when those doors could be closed?
Not while burning a fire. No, definitely not while burning a fire. We're talking about masonry. The only other you will find, if we skip into like a zero clearance prefabricated fireplace, the same thing is going to apply to a lot of those fireplaces as well. We want to leave those doors in that open position when you're using it so that you're not overheating that metal box.
Yeah, and I do think you brought up a good point a little while ago as well. That's what the spark guard is definitely for, on the safety side, right? Closing that mesh so that sparks and coals aren't going to come rolling out of there. But then again, you need to know what type of fireplace you have, because that, in one statement you've made, is now a huge safety issue. Not just breaking glass, but overheating that firebox and that wall in general could become a bigger issue. Especially, and what most people don't understand, doing it once, probably not. But as you continuously do that and you dry out the studs behind that wall or that are a part of that wall, you can get them so dry that this turns into a major issue down the road. So, wow, I'm glad you brought that one up, Randy. It comes to zero clearance boxes. All right, so we talked about burning at high heat. We talked about closing them off as the night comes down. But like you even said, it's a single log left in there. Do you have any input in terms of what if I have a gas log set inside of the firebox that is, 95,000 BTUs?
So gas log sets are going to be the same thing. You're not going to want to have those glass doors because a couple things. They're going to generate a ton of heat, and you could have the same problem with the glass, even though you don't have the sparks. You could heat up the glass, but also I feel more importantly is it's gas. And if you have any kind of valve controls or anything like that, you are going to damage those controls. Melt the valves, melt the controls. You could overheat some type of system and just create a huge problem there for yourself. So when it comes to gas logs, we definitely don't want to be closing those and leaving any kind of glass closed.
That's such a good point, because we just went through an episode on sizing your gas log set, and we did an entire episode, I believe an entire episode just on the controls.
I believe so, yes.
Yeah, why it's important to have that manufacturers talk to. You need space around the controls, around the unit as a whole. Yeah, you all of a sudden close those doors and you just got a hot box going on in there. That's going to ruin your controls.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Randy, for joining us again today, man. I appreciate you a ton and joining us to talk about, can I burn my fireplace with my glass door shut?
Absolutely. No. Happy to.
Absolutely. And if you have any questions yourself, we have multiple ways that you can get a hold of us. And as always, we're so thankful that you listen. We really appreciate our listeners out there. And you've been listening to the Experts in Fire podcast.